Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Let's give it a start on Agentic AI, or maybe how we call it. Maybe a chat about how in the future also the way how we work might shift. You will see that with the topic of autonomous decision makers in the processes you are operating in your firm. What do we learn today? We'll take a look into, of course, first a basic understanding, trying to make some examples around how actually AI agents work, what they are, and what is the potential, which we are really actively talking about. So our clients are very much interested into making this work, to be honest. So happy to get questions later on. Then, of course, looking into how that is kind of redesigning workflows and processes. So how does it work different than process optimization in the past? And then looking into, to make this work, there needs to be really a strong governance and IT foundation. So we'll look into topics that are basically around that. Yeah, so my name is Christian, as stated, working for Bain & Company, located in Zurich. I'm an enterprise architect, so an expert on the topic of basically business architecture, data architecture, and that's a big topic at the moment, getting data ready for AI usage. So that's mainly, I think, for the coming years, because most of the clients have done their use cases and exploration phases, so they tried out a lot of AI solutions in different areas, and now they need to scale it, and then they see that their data is not ready at all and spread around their systems. Let's give it a first run on the introduction. So what's different about like agentic AI now? And we'll also have a path on where it comes from. So the main thing which you can think about is like that before it was always guided, and now it is that the agent is really autonomous. So he can act on his own, or she, and has an integrated memory. So it's like it's really working on its own. So it's not anymore like a prompting back and forth, like more personal productivity game, but it's really something you instruct, and then this agent is working. What is special about that? It can have, of course, that reasoning, which you know from the ChatGPT, so on and so forth, but it can also, again, learn, but it can also use tools. So you see that also within ChatGPT normally, that it can now search the web, that it can search web pages and all that stuff. Once you have the ChatGPT agent, it can on its own go through web pages and check for information. So it's really a step forward. And it can start to collaborate, which means if you build a chain of agents, they can work together. As long as they have the right information access, it is possible that basically these agents work without any human intervention together. And then, of course, knowledge access, so whatever you give them as an access, they can access it. And they can go through PPTs, whatever. So all the information you have in knowledge management systems, which is a bit not highly structured in the sense of that you can access it as a database, they can use it. So that's kind of the agentic AI. Maybe an example just to be a bit more easy to understand, like how do we come from a, let's say, old world, more rule-based automation towards really agentic. If you see the first one here, it's really transactional. So that would be the question you asking a chatbot, and it gives you just a very clear answer. You ask for what's my balance, and it says your balance is X. And that information is purely based on, in the background, if somebody asks about the balance, please go to information source 1 and take that one information and retrieve it. So very much, as you would call it, an if-then logic. So very, very, and then it's kind of, if there's nothing in the table, it will just return 0. It will say, I don't know what your balance is. So it's a very static answer. There's no adaptability, there is no learning. If the question is written down wrong in the chatbot, or if there's no balance found in that information source, no information returned. Second one is then what you most likely have as traditional AI, or it starts often with this process automation in the sense of RPA, that you have very clear rules. There's a kind of a decision tree, and it's very clear on that decision tree, it asks you the next question, and if it doesn't get the answer, it asks you the next question. But if that decision tree, again, has the answer to the question, it would drop out again. So the flexibility is already a bit better, but it's still an issue of that it only learns from historical data, so anything that you gave it in the past. So that's kind of the second stage. Then you have Gen AI, like we have it today with the transformers. That's most likely what you also are knowing from ChatGPT. You ask it, and it learns and generates new content, correct? And it can also reason. It can give you answers to your questions. So there you could also ask questions like, hey, how can I kind of invest money? And it would give you an answer to what you could do. And then Agentic AI is really about that, being able to go and search for information for you. So you would ask it and say like, okay, what could be a good way to invest? And it would say, okay, I'm now going on and I'm visiting all the main banks pages, main investment company pages, and collect information. And then I'm coming back to you and saying, okay, I found the following. Where should I go on? And then you just say like, hey, I want more investments in areas, for example, sustainability. Okay, it will go again and try to find that information. So very much in the sense of it has a memory and reasoning, and it can use tools. So, and you will see that with ChatGPT agent, which is most likely the one which the world knows best, maybe. So it will be enabled more and more. So you will have standard connectors, so it can connect to your enterprise data, get them the access to the CRM, only read, and it will be able to retrieve the information from that system. Give them access to other sources. It will be able to look through them based on your questions. Still, of course, ever also on the right-hand side, it has some, you need to configure some stuff, correct? So it doesn't work on its own. If we now look from a technical perspective, I mentioned it already a bit, where we are coming from. So when we look from a find the value, convert to digital, rule-based, traditional generative AI, you can see that different technologies play into that. So we had this process mining. I think Celonis is something most people know, very classic also for SAP world, to kind of mine processes, to understand how fast does a process run, what's the information taken. Then OCR, that's all about like document scanning, so being able to retrieve from an ID card all the numbers, kind of your age and whatever, and then bring that into a database, so pretty much very clear instructions of what needs to be done. And then scripting, that's very basic coding around, and very static in the sense if-then, following is happening. Workflows, also pretty static. RPA is then more decision tree. You might know the UiPath, that's a tool where you can model processes, which then is like kind of run through. Still pretty static. iPaaS is more a technical topic, that's integration platforms, so data integration, very technical. And then we move over to the topic of NLP and conversational AI, and then moving on to Gen AI more with the LLMs, which we'll look later into. You see some examples here which firms are doing. Each of these are just examples, correct? And expect there to be, I think that the topic of RPA in the middle, there's quite some companies which are doing that, but it moves definitely to the right. So that's kind of a bit the more technical perspective. Maybe just one thing, this iPaaS, which looks always a bit crazy, is very important because it's basically data integration platforms. So because you need data to feed into your Gen AI solutions. So this is very important to structure, especially in the company, the data that you have. Now moving on to what does it actually mean for the business world. I said it in the beginning already. Most companies are going for use case based implementation. So they select certain areas in their company and say, okay, I want to have a sales chatbot that helps my sales representatives to be faster in finding sales information in the firm, so to the inside. or they decide the other way around and saying, hey, we have very basic customer products, mass products, where we can have the first level support in a bot. And that's then to the outside, correct? So it's basically a customer bot. And then I start to develop it and then see relatively fast value, because that's most likely what you want here. You want to focus, you want to learn the technology first and see if it's really working. And then you want to be fast in saying, hey, we rolled this out, it's live for the customers, they can use it. By that, you often then find the next, you find the next, you find the next, and you go all the way in the company, basically laser focusing on certain simple or like single process steps, which of course gives you a bit of a not like very, let's say, comprehensive transformation approach in the end, but it helps you to understand what AI can do, and also, of course, when we talk about what management wants to see is always like, what's the result? Can I get 10% faster? Can I get, does it help me to understand the markets better? So to get kind of into a very results-driven discussion, that helped so far pretty well. Problem is it's a bit bits and pieces. And also the issue was, if you have a bigger company with, let's say, more than 2-3 business units, then most likely each business unit used different AI tools, and they also used different kind of companies that helped them to implement it. So there was a huge kind of span of different technologies then in the firm, which then in the bigger scale would be not to be really managed anymore. So idea more into AI-driven end-to-end process redesign, which is a bit like enabling the classical process re-engineering you might know towards AI. And what's now the special thing? Most likely you have people running certain steps to achieve an outcome. They use information and they use IT. Now it's a bit that one takes the data first and that you say like, okay, what's the data output I need? And what's kind of the information that is processed? And then you give that to your agent, which then is helping you along that process. We'll take a look into that now, how that works. First example, quite visual in the sense of you having a loan process. So basically, you want to get a loan, and now you look into the key steps of how that works. And then each key step, normally you would think about like, what are the key steps, who is doing that in the organization, all that classical process re-engineering. Of course, still, you need to understand the process, that stays the same. But now you would always turn it around and only say, okay, which information do I need to run this process step? And can the agent do it alone? First question. So, and if the agent cannot do it alone, you leave it manual. And if the agent can do it alone, you most likely decide only, can he do it alone in like a sense that it will be as good as a human could do it, then you would be fully automated, or do you need a human intervention at the end, or in the middle, correct? So it could be that, I don't know, a certain number can be only retrieved in a client interview. Okay, then that agent would ask you, please give me that number. You kind of talked to the person, depending on your schedule, because I saw you scheduled a client interview for the following day. So that's kind of how it works. If we go through, you have the submission, most likely a mobile web portal today, depends a bit on the company. Then you would have like that typical identity check and data validation, which is a very static thing in the end, correct? So you have, if you send in documents, you have OCR, no issue in the end to be today able to nearly 100% even recognize handwriting. No issue. And that maybe 5% of documents you wouldn't be able to read, you send to a small intervention team and say, please check these documents and make sure we put the right data in. And you would check the customer identity, you would check also ID documents. All that is very standardized, especially when we talk about ID documentation and who you are. That can be easily read into a system. So that can be only a check in the end, or the rest can be automated. Credit scoring, next topic is a bit the question by country, to be honest, how it works. In some countries, you can access it directly as an API. So you can get a lot of information which you can retrieve and automatically take a look against the customer data, how it looks like. In other countries it's not possible, then it would be more manual here. But still, everything, and that's along the process, which the agent can help you with the first analysis, in the sense of I looked at the data from the submission and I looked at the information you gave me on the inside. It can get you a first sight of, hey, is this a good customer? Should we give them the loan or not? Correct? So again, credit scoring, document verification, also that the agent can help a lot. Also in a sense of spotting mistakes. I guess on the personal productivity, everybody of us has thrown maybe a document into ChatGPT saying, is there any spelling mistakes in a document? And it spots like page 1, page 2. So that's what it can help you with. Risk evaluation, again, as I said, you have, as the company issuing the loan, you have normally a risk model internally, and you can kind of give these risk models to the agent and saying like, please, based on the information you got from the customer, tell me, is this a high risk if I take that loan or a fair risk to take? And of course, that high versus low is not only if the customer is really a good one, but it's only also against your portfolio. So if you maybe have taken a lot of risky customers in the last 3 months because you wanted to increase revenue fast for the loan area, you might be able to say, hey, please be a bit more conservative. We only accept high quality customers now, because otherwise the risk overall for the firm would be too big. Loan decision, here you see, of course, definitely for the loan decision, you would in the end have human intervention. Correct? So you would ask, hey, this is the full portfolio. We looked at the risk, we looked at the documents. There would be a page which tells you verified, score is let's say, low risk, and all that kind of as a summary. And then a human can either look into the details or just accept it or decline it. Customer notification is then done automatically, and then you go into disbursement and servicing, which you can also automate a lot. As you can see here, it's not always that all of this is Gen AI, because whenever you can be very deterministic, so what I told you about the decision tree, so I know there's 2, 3 options, it's most likely faster and more efficient to take just a very traditional RPA process automation thing. Or if you have high scale, so like every minute I need to process a lot of data, which is pretty clear of what to do. First example. Second is a different one. So here we're talking about vendor risk management. And on the left side we see Steve having a normal day doing everything manual. And on the right you would see he's Gen AI enabled. And the issue with that is most likely that a lot of the processes, especially the bigger the firm gets, are very intense in who you need to align it with. So you get a lot of documents, that's the first thing, so you need to get oversight of the documents, and then you need to align it with different people. So if you could, of course, be much better in summarizing and preparing the documents already, and being pretty direct in, this is the only answer I need. Afterwards, I can say if this supplier is a risk for us or not. And that's what you see here, basically, that in the end, you can, of course, dramatically reduce the time you need to do the process. We'll see on the next page how that now works on a step-by-step level. So you see here how it works end-to-end, and you see that the agents can help you with, let's say, 80% of the steps, and the other maybe 20% are still with you. So it's still that you have from time to time humans doing the job, and then you have other things which are then done by the agent. And how that normally works, you would still have this kind of workflow being in kind of a application where you go through, so it guides you through the steps. And it always tells you, okay, we have step 1 done, we got a need to buy, we got all the basically needs structured, we have a list, and that list is then of course sent to you as the manager, and then you select what to do with it. And then there is the next step, which is then that tender launch assistant, which helps you to find suppliers for that request, to kind of pre-qualify them, put a long list, agree about a short list to contact. So all that stuff which normally takes a lot of time. And of course, at each step, as you can see, there is always a human after each step, it can still say, I'm sorry, this is not a good answer. So it can always be the case that after you have all the kind of the requests being structured, that you say, no, this kind of structuring, I know already from my chats with some colleagues that this is structured wrong, correct? So you can still intervene at different points in the journey. Okay, then you go through the offer unpacking and scoring assistant. That's kind of when you get first results. You know that RFI, RFP processes where you get results, then you can stage them, and then it runs through till you basically order. I think what you can see here is that most likely in the beginning, it will not be that the agents are working together and are running everything for you. But it's more like that they kind of help you to reduce very kind of time-intense research and time-intense kind of structuring and document writing and all that kind of stuff. And therefore, on the lower end, you can see sometimes it's automated, sometimes it's kind of semi-automated, so it's supporting you and giving you a kind of a first try. Because as we know, sometimes you just need the kind of from 0 to 60%, correct? The other one is then based on your experience, very easy to complete. And most likely these kind of processes here are very much in the sense of very document heavy. So people are sending a lot of PDFs and all that stuff, which you would need a lot of time to read. So that helps you to be much more efficient in procurement. Still, you need experts, of course, and that's always the same. I'm always telling also even my team when they're using ChatGPT, it gets you faster to the first answer, but validation is key. So because if the financial data that you got out of ChatGPT is wrong, you might be into serious trouble, correct? So you still need somebody who then looks at it and tells, okay, this makes sense, and sometimes it's a line-by-line check with the source. So that needs to be done. So that's kind of another example. Now we're running into the topic of what does it mean for risk and for all the supporting things. So we know that we can basically use agentic AI and different AI models to kind of improve processes, but risks. So we have very different risks in the area of using agents, and I think the most easy one everybody could think about before we go through here is like, let's say you forgot about that agent, correct? And it still has access to information, or the agent makes mistakes and nobody spots it. So it's very human things that are embedded here. But of course you have different types. So you have, of course, the data management risk. So of course that is the topic of data governance, which is important to have, especially the information which is core to your business, that this information is well structured. Because otherwise the AI, it can sometimes be a bit blending, but in the detail it will not be able to help you out. And related to that, it's of course all the topic of data privacy. So if you don't tell the agent and configure it in a way that it acts according to the rules, it will just do it, correct, what you're told. So it's not that easy. Model risk, so whatever kind of LLMs you use, there are certain biases, so the models need to be monitored all the time so that you are not running into the problem of that you don't know how it was decided and that you don't know what the model is really doing. Of course, vendors goes into that, so you need to, very often you use not your own Gen AI models, but you use models from third-party providers. Again, famous topic is ChatGPT getting implemented or like integrated into your IT, because then you actually use a third-party tool which analyzes your data in the firm, which of course is the risk if that kind of falls down or is kind of processing your data not in a secure way or to another place, then you would be screwed. So it's pretty much of or if that vendor is, not be able to process as much information as you asked them for, all that kind of stuff. Tech risk is then going into how is that all implemented. We'll take a look. Information security, big topic. So when these agents, they also get access to systems. If they have access to the wrong systems, or the systems you maybe don't actually, maybe only accidentally gave them, they will use all information they have, no matter what. So if you don't tell them they shouldn't do it, they will do it. So they act pretty mechanically what that is. Legal risks, there's very different topics around legal risk depending to the use case. So that's really something which you need to be really careful of, also in the sense of what is the risk that this is actually a digital employee, which can in countries mean very different things, because it's kind of sometimes spotted like a person, correct? So, but it's a topic which depends on which country you're in. And reputational risk, if that agent, I think the best thing is, which we all know, is always that if a chatbot, which works to the outside, tells something wrong, correct? So they say really something wrong. So they suggest the wrong product all the time, then clients would be upset. So it's the same if you are driving your Tesla and it does some weird things, correct? Which are related to that, using the car, then you would also say like, hey, the IT of that car doesn't work, correct? So that's the same here. If they act and it's not according to what you want as a firm, very big risk. You see a lot of risks here, some tactics, definitely something which is a big game, because display can really go out of control, to be honest. So if you don't manage that, especially on the tech and then on the governance side, right, going out of control is pretty much possible. You will later also see that actually the complexity from a tech side is even increasing with all we do here. Because all the rest of the IT, all the CRM systems, ERP, whatever you know, they will stay. So they are not going away. So you have that on top here. Some ideas on the topic of how to now make this work with the agents. So of course the topic is, first you can think about is limit scope. Give the agent only the information they should access and tell them what to do very clearly. Because otherwise it would be that they are starting to drift left and right. Because if you give them access to a lot more information than they need, over time the model is kind of adapting, so it will take more and more information, which is actually should not take. So and even the problem sometimes is if you give them access to information and tell them not to do it, it can be that the model is drifting and still using the information. So that's one way. Traceability and transparency, that's pretty much about that you understand how does it work. So what is done basically by the agent. You also see some of these being now implemented in ChatGPT, that it tells you which web pages it's going through, what is the answers it's giving. So that's kind of giving more transparency of what is happening on the inside. So what is the model doing basically to give you the answer. Human in the loop, that's always, as I said, like if you say this is a pretty standard thing and it does it the same way human does, maybe you don't have intervention at each step, but most likely before a big decision is done, so basically definitely before you offer a loan, you would have like a human looking into all the kind of information that it has been processed before, so you're not running into a risk for the firm. Yeah, I think the rest, some more rule enforcement, of course, decision criteria is also a big topic, so still, if you don't have a good idea about the decisions in general, before the decision tree was very fixed, you still need, with an agent, a very good idea on which are the key decisions along the process. Because otherwise, it will get to a point where the agent just runs for themselves. Bit of more complex here. So this talks about now that you need to really have the process on the tech side under control. So when you really start about thinking to deploy agents, you need to really follow the steps and be clear about that you at each step need to follow like guidelines, and that you need to check requirements and be very clear about what happens. So what is this agent really doing? Check, not like once in a while, but on a continuous basis. Because the problem is that the models behind, over time, they might get biased, they kind of drift away. So there's issues that this can get out of control. So therefore you need to be really structured around how that works. How do I like develop an agent? How do I deploy it? How do I monitor it all the time? That's basically what this is telling you. Tech side a bit more. As you know, there is like basically the providers of the LLMs, and then there is the models itself. So the models itself, you have GPT-4, now we have GPT-5. You have the Llama model from Meta. That's kind of the models which these Gen AI agents are based on. So that's kind of the heart of it. And then, of course, are all the companies which are offering these and are also offering technology. So like without like NVIDIA technology, most likely a lot of this would not be possible. So that's the same with like certain cloud services you need just to run basically these agents. And then, of course, the capabilities of what they can do from a technical perspective is then anything from text generation towards like voice to translation, anything you could think about, but also topics like image capturing or like that it can synthesize on how a speech was given, so they could analyze on what my tone is in talking to you. All these kind of topics from a really technical standpoint are clear, and that you kind of use them in the right way. When we look into what is that technically, most likely you have these archetypes of platforms, how you use Agentic AI in your firm. Most likely there's these low-code platforms, so making it very easy for users to code something without code. It's most likely putting together processes, putting together data outputs and information that needs to be processed. That's kind of the more traditional companies around RPA and process automation, and then you move towards cloud-native platforms. That is a lot of the foundational services you need, access management, compute power, and so on and so forth. A lot also where you can just run models directly. So open source, large language models you can deploy on your own and just use the model. It's not very agentic then, but at least you can use the model. In the middle, it's very interesting, and that's always the big topic where people say, like, how should I now do it in the firm? A lot of the AI services are more and more driven, of course, by the different vendors in your firm. So like for the CRM area, that would be Salesforce. They have an interest in using AI in their CRM processes, correct? So like all the customer oriented process. The same for SAP. They will come up with saying like, hey, don't you want to use AI for the certain billing processes? Pretty straightforward. You can reduce manual work. So that's kind of where this kind of has like very specific to that context, it will be applied. And it can be that then, for example, Salesforce is using their own model or they integrate ChatGPT. Can be both. So it can be an own model, an own agent which helps you, and it can be an external service. And then pure agentic platforms, that's now getting a bit more advanced, because as I said in the beginning, in the end, like the 5 years from now picture would be that multiple agents are seamlessly working together. You saw it a bit in the process where there was still in the middle always a human. You want, of course, more and more to come to a model where you kind of bring up the accuracy and where you can tell then agent 1, if everything is fine, please give that to agent 2. And then I would only be as a human in the end of the process and say like, hey, I looked at all the information you put together, all the work you did in the last 2 days based on the information you had, and then you would hit the button of releasing, for example, that loan. So there you have like solutions which are working on that to kind of set up these agents, and then you have pure developer frameworks that goes towards all that. How much time do I have?
Very little time left.
Good. We are nearly at the end. Nearly at the end. I talk too much. No, that's good. I think we are pretty good here. Last page on the content side. Maybe this is getting a bit more technical. It just shows you the picture of you have an enterprise IT today already. So you have a lot of solutions which are happening. You have a lot of use cases which are looking into how to use large language models in certain specific contexts. For example, risk modeling is a fair topic for that. Very deep, very much of help. But now all the kind of agentic, so kind of solutions or like digital people which work on their own come on top. So you need to manage these kind of agentic AI service, and that's kind of what you see in the kind of top to down, how that kind of is set up, and that this works across your company. So this is kind of touchment with the customer, CRM, all the knowledge management processing, then the core business and enterprise support is HR and so on and so forth. So it just tells you that IT and tech gets even more complex by adding the agents that are doing something on their own as the digital end user of your enterprise applications. This tells a bit the story from the beginning. Experimentation is actually over. A lot of people looking into scaling or even transforming their businesses. I think you see it also a bit in the media. Some companies are putting pretty big bets on how many people they will need in the future versus how many digital people will be there. So digital people in the sense of agents. Discussion there is, of course, if you have a country where in the next 10 years people will retire a lot, you would need to have that increase in productivity anyway, because otherwise you wouldn't have the experts at scale you would need to run your business. Just saying, for big firms, it's not always a kind of dark-sided topic. It's also like, how many people do you have as a workforce in your country versus amount of work that needs to get done. That's it for now. Summarizing all I said, open for any questions, or we need to go on, I guess.
We have no time for questions, sorry.
Good. Then I'll be here for like another half an hour. So if you have questions, just come to me. Let's have a chat. Thanks.